I've already reviewed the Asus Sica and Gladius, so if you want my thoughts on the shapes, dimensions, and what hand size they suit, check out that video with the link in the description and comments. In this video, I want to focus on the differences, and whether or not they're worth the upgrade. I don't have the Sica anymore, but this is the Strix Impact. Basically, it's like the original Razer Abysses. I think if they added curves to the design, it could be one of the best shapes. It seems they've used the 3310 sensor again though. The only difference is probably the RGB lighting. This video is going to be more focused on the Gladius for that reason. In the box for the Gladius II, you get a 1 meter rubber cable and a 2 meter braided cable, and a replacement set of switches and a sticker. You get the same with the original Gladius, but instead of the sticker, you get replacement feet, because to change over the switches, you have to damage the feet to get the mouse open. You see on the new Gladius, they've made the feet smaller and added some plugs to allow access to the screws. The Gladius II now has a lot of RGB, and you can see next to each other, they're almost exactly the same in materials and shape. The biggest difference would be the sniper button on the left, which I think is right where most people would place their thumb. That means it's in the way. For me, that's a big drawback. It makes it uncomfortable. The shape is really good, so I hope they continue to work on the design, although I'd probably taper this side edge more and make it go more inward, as I don't like having ledges for fingers. The build quality is quite good on both. They feel solid, and tapping and shaking them, the wheel on the Gladius rattles a tiny bit. The cable on the Impact is smooth enough, but it's not very flexible, and while the braided cable is better on the Gladius, it's not too flexible either. The first version of the Impact didn't have any actual mouse feet. Asus have changed it so it does now, and like the Gladius, they feel smooth. As for weights, the original Gladius is 119 grams, and the new one is 111, which is better for a lot of competitive players, but still a bit too much. This would be better at about 100 grams, but of course it's personal preference. Testing the sensor in game, they both handle the sniper test quite well, pixel by pixel and smooth tracking, and I can't make them spin out just by doing fast movements. However, in the tilt slam test on the Gladius, I noticed I was firing, so it has that tap activation thing, where if you hit the mouse down hard enough, it'll cause the buttons to activate. The Impact is fine, but because it's a 3310, the tilt slam test makes it spin out really easily. As you can see here, tilting it and slamming it down makes it lose track constantly. And it has a liftoff distance of about 2 DVDs on cloth and hard pads, while the Gladius is about under 1 on each. Testing for acceleration, it might appear there's some deceleration on the Impact, but I don't think that's what it is. I don't think it's tracking every pixel properly when moved. I really struggled to use this mouse at times, often complaining on stream that it didn't move to where it should. This acceleration test is actually going well compared to what I experienced in game. Sometimes it would only move half the distance I expected, so the sensor implementation could use some work. It was even worse before the firmware update, but I had no problem with the Sica. No such problem on the Gladius, all good there. In the line tests, both sensors performed quite well, but neither did it perfectly. It might be just the implementation, hopefully the firmware update will fix it. Nothing to really affect gameplay, but I've circled some points on a line that didn't track as well as it should have with the Gladius. So the actual sensors are very good, and they should be, they're top opticals, but they're not as good as other implementations of those sensors. I trust Asus will continue working on them though. In the software for the Gladius, you can set some profiles, change the buttons to the usual commands, including mouse, keyboard, macro, and multimedia. And for macro, it records mouse buttons and the wheel, and keyboard of course. The DPI goes from 100 to 12,000 in steps of 100, and then there are some other options that I don't usually touch. And the lighting is smooth and good, but there's no speed option for the wave, which is a shame. But you can adjust the 3 zones independently. And lastly, there's surface tuning. For the Impact, you get the same button options and macro. DPI ranges from 50 to 5000 in steps of 50, and there aren't as many options for lighting, but it still looks good. The button latency appears to be at a minimum, and they can compete with the G703. I did multiple tests with these, just to see what the lowest score was, and I managed a few clicks at about 150 milliseconds. And in game, I found I was hitting a fair few rails with the Impact. The size is right for me, but I think the low button latency did help with that too. So neither test is accurate, but from what I can tell, these are actually really good. If I could have one mouse, I don't think I'd want either of these. There are better options out there at this time. That said, they're still quite good, and if you want a no-frills small mouse, I'd still prefer to recommend the Sica, but the Impact could be really good one day. For the Gladius II, due to the sniper button, I would rather use the original Gladius. In conclusion, I have to say that I'm a bit disappointed with these due to the issues. The Sica was really good, and the Impact should be better, but until they get the performance right, it won't be. So they really need to work on the performance. For now, I'm going to stay with the safer bet of the Sica in the top 40, and if you check the top 40 in the future and the Impact is there instead, that means they've updated the firmware, and it's now the better mouse. So check that for updates. As for the Gladius II, if it didn't have the sniper button, I would use it instead of the original, but if they're going to make another, I hope they change even more than just that. The lower weight is good, but could be better. Hope that helps. Special thanks to Asus for sending these out for review, and if you want to help support the channel, I'll leave some links in the description. Subscribe, like and share this video, and I'll catch you in the next.